Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience of SmithWeekly, including Edward S., Luke A., Craig S., and Andy J. On the program today is a new guest. Mr. Ewan Downie is with us. Ewan is the Chief Executive Officer of I-80 Gold Corp. The company is focused on producing and developing gold and silver projects from underground and conventional open pit operations exclusively in Nevada, underpinned with existing small-scale production at Granite Creek and Ruby Hill mines, centralized processing infrastructure at the Lone Tree facilities, and ongoing project expansion and development at all company projects, as well as the McCoy Cove project. I-80 Gold is listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol IAUX and on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol IAU. Mr. Downie, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, Ewan, and first time on the program. And usually with that, we like to kick it off here for the audience with you giving us your background and experience in this junior natural resource sector.
I come from a family. I guess my father was a geologist, so I grew up in mining cities, born in Timmins, Ontario, one of the gold capitals of the world, and took business at university and went straight into the mineral exploration and development field. Started my first public company went public in late 1998. And that company was called Wolfden Resources Inc., which was taken over in the mid 2000s. And as part of that takeover, we spun out our gold assets in the Red Lake district to create what became Premier Gold. Premier Gold we ran up until just a couple of years ago, when Premier Gold was acquired by Equinox mainly for our large Greenstone project here where I live, which is in northwestern Ontario. And as part of that takeover, we spun out our Nevada assets to create I-80 Gold. So I've been in the industry building companies, or successfully building companies, for well over 25 years now.
Thank you for that, Ewan. I appreciate that, and good track record there, and appreciate you sharing that with us. And I'd like to get your thoughts, because you've, of course, been here for quite a while and you've seen all of these ups and downs and good times and tough times in the sector. But what are your thoughts on the current junior natural resource sector in general, maybe, and then also specific to gold and maybe silver, if you want to jump on that a little bit. But, at this point, given the sentiment in the juniors, there's distraction out there for other shiny objects in the broad market, as you well know. And then, of course, the underlying prices for physical precious metals, gold in particular, are starting to show some real strength here. How do you look at this market, and what would you say about current conditions?
In some ways, I've never seen a market like this before for the mining sector. It's a cyclical business. The price action, it goes up and down, the metal prices with world economy and markets. But the last year and a half has been a downward pressure on mining companies in general, not just gold. All mining companies have really not seen a whole lot of attention from the market. And it's been a real head scratcher. Sure, we've had, I think, record rate increases happen. And typically that is negative for gold, and I think it was perceived as being very negative for gold, but the price of gold did not drop as much as you would have thought in that environment. It held up really well, and we haven't started cutting, and we just saw record highs. But I'd say the narrative towards mining has been negative and hugely negative, especially over the last year. And it's been a real hard one to explain. There's junior explorers trading at 1, 2, 3 pennies because there's just no market for these type of companies right now. But it's quite possible that this gold just broke all-time record again on Friday, that maybe we're just starting to see that narrative shift. On Friday, there was a couple of pieces on CNBC, and that was probably the first time in a year I've seen gold mentioned on CNBC. And this morning on Business News Network here in Canada, the gold was one of the first topics they talked about. So potentially we're starting to see some chatter about the industry again, and with gold prices where they are, perhaps that's going to start filtering into the mining stocks like I-80, and we'll see more appreciation than we've already witnessed. We have gone up in the last week or two, but I would have thought we'd go higher when you hit, or all stocks would go higher, hitting record all-time highs.
Lots of stuff to digest there. It's funny when you mentioned the couple pennies. It's almost like the exchanges might want to start considering trading at tenths of pennies.
Yeah.
With some of these, it's really suppressed. Fully agreed. And I think, with companies like I-80, you guys have been able to do company specific work and company specific success that has helped patch you through, I suppose, some of these tough times in the market. And certainly I-80 is one of those, in my vision, success stories and company that is growing and will be demonstrating future value. And you could see that pipeline coming. So I appreciate your comments there. And I think we're also at a very interesting point here with just the change in policies out there on monetary policy, broad market situation, and then of course where we see the strength in the gold price. And I think folks continue to wait for that confirmation, and maybe they're not convinced yet, at least some of them. But again, we've seen things perk up and certain groups of investors really start to jump on these things when they see the sentiment is really blown up as well. And of course, that takes another skill set to be able to do that. Why don't we jump into I-80 here? And I want to get to the capital structure in a moment, but why don't you give the audience just a quick overview of the company? And let's include here, if you will, general operations update and maybe a 2024 outlook.
Yeah, our company has been around now for still less than 3 years. As I mentioned, company was formed as part of the spin out of the during the takeover of Premier Gold Mines. So, as a company, as a mining company, um, taking a project from the first drill hole to becoming a resource to then permitting it and then building it, most often takes 10 to 15 years on a project. The Greenstone property that Equinox took over Premier for is just about to go into production for them, but we started working that property in 2007 and 8, really end of 2007, beginning of 2008. So the kind of the life cycle to build a mining operation is really quite extensive, and the timeline can be significant. Permitting is a major hurdle. What we have at I-80 is we have permitted projects. We are currently one of the largest holders of gold resources in all of the United States. All of our operations are in Nevada, and Nevada is currently ranked by the Fraser Institute as the #1 mining jurisdiction in the world. And we have been able to build up our portfolio. But it even though the company is fairly new at less than 3 years, we have been building this portfolio of assets in Nevada for more than a decade. So we've been working to secure what we believe are some of the top quality projects in the state, but it didn't happen overnight. And now we are taking those projects through exploration, definition drilling, so we can firm up resources and reserves so that we can do full feasibility studies. And we have the luxury of being able to perform test mining on these zones because they are permitted, and a significant amount of the underground infrastructure, especially at Granite Creek, was already in place. So the timeline for us to become what our goal is to become the second largest gold producing on a gold equivalent basis company in the United States. The timeline for us to get there is expected to be significantly shorter than you'd usually expect in a mining company, because of the fact that these are brownfield sites that are permitted and we have processing infrastructure already constructed on these sites.
Ewan, that's great. And I appreciate you covering off some of this piece because to me, the model makes a lot more sense because you guys have existing infrastructure. Some of it needs some work, of course. You guys are working on that. You have the ability to have small scale production right now and growing. And you also have the ability for exploration upside and future project development. Combination of that model is a really good setup where there's so many companies in this sector that don't have basically those three components. And so I think that's important also to point out for the audience to take note of as they look at these different equities and as we see different guests come across our channel as well. On that, why don't we stop at capital structure for a moment, cover off the current balance sheet of the company for us, the shares outstanding, as well as major shareholders on the roster, including management and yourself.
Yeah, so currently our company has approximately 300 million shares outstanding. So that results in us having a market capitalization in US dollars of about 450 million. The major shareholders include Equinox Gold. When we did the SpinCo, they maintained the position. But we have big supporters like Sprott, the Sprott Capital Group, which used to be Tocqueville out of New York. Fidelity has been a longtime shareholder of ours. Other large shareholders is Orion Mine Finance, one of the premier finance groups when it comes to funding mineral companies to go from explorer to developer. And then myself, I am listed as in the top 10 shareholders. I own approximately or getting close to 7 million shares currently of the company, and approximately half of those have been acquired since we became a trading company. So I've consistently been a buyer of our company in the open market. And every time we have done a financing in order to continue to facilitate our growth, I have participated in those financings.
You would appreciate that. And it's always good to see management members writing checks and writing them of size, not just a dollar, writing size like you're writing. So I appreciate your comments on that. Well, as you know, the natural resource sector generally continues to be starved of competent people on the construction, commissioning, and operations expertise level. Talk about some of the work you're doing on this front at the company, as well as key folks on your team that will be contributing or are contributing right now to these areas of expertise.
We've been fortunate to really create a really deep team. The management or the board of the company is very well rounded, from people from mining engineers to accountants to legalese. Our chairman ran Tahoe, one of the large gold producers previously. And really that's just the board. The board sort of oversees what happens in the company. More importantly, I think we've done a tremendous job at attracting a very core group of company builders and mining professionals in Nevada. So our head office is actually in Reno, Nevada, and led by Matt Gilley. Matt Gilley is our president of the company and chief operating officer. Matt Gilley used to run the Cortez operation for Barrick. The Cortez mine in Nevada is the second largest gold producing mine in the state. And it was a very successful operation. We also have Andy Cole on our team. Andy Cole was previously the executive general manager of the Carlin operations, which is the largest, I believe it's the largest mine in North America. So these two have very substantial experience in building and operating mines in the state of Nevada. So well known to regulators, which is very important when it comes to permitting and maintaining your operations. And they've been able to bring in a very deep team behind them. We have one of the top permitting people in the state on our team and some very high-end metallurgists who've worked with us. So we've really been fortunate to have been able to attract a really deep, experienced team in the state. And ultimately, it's that team that will realize the success for this company. And in our last conversation, we were talking about market capitalization. And as I mentioned, our plan is to build the second largest gold producing company in the United States. When we complete that build out over the next several years, we expect to produce about 400,000 to 500,000 ounces gold equivalent, because we do have base metals as well. And companies that side include Lundin Gold, Alamos Gold, and many others. And typically companies of this size trade at market capitalizations between 2.5 and 5 billion US. So that's why, in my opinion, you look at growth and development companies like I-80 as a potential investment, is because companies like Alamos, their chance of doubling their share price or market capitalization, they're going to make some major moves to achieve that. And for a company like us to achieve what we expect is going to be a $2.5 to $5 billion market cap is expect to be done with significantly less capital than what would normally happen. So we do expect that we've got the right team, we've got the right assets, and with our build out, we will become I believe will become one of the top companies in the gold and operations sector, sort of a mid-tier producer, so to speak.
And that's good to highlight. And I want to come back to that discussion on strategy a little bit later, Ewan. I appreciate the comments there. Let's take a look at the exploration success really across all projects. The company has been active on exploration work. There's been a number of news releases out there highlighting some of that exploration success. I would like to have you gear us towards what you see out of those results as stuff that you're very interested in, maybe some of the highlights, and just talk about those general results as the company has been defining additional resources across really the entire project portfolio.
Yeah, thanks. So this might be a little long-winded because we're not just a single asset company. In fact, we're currently advancing 3 projects simultaneously to achieve our long-term goal. The Lone Tree processing plant is an autoclave facility we acquired from Nevada Gold Mines. Nevada Gold Mines is the largest gold producing company in North America, as a North American only, and they produce entirely out of Nevada. So that company, Nevada Gold Mines, is owned by the world's 2 largest gold mining companies, Newmont and Barrick. So we were able to secure one of their processing facilities in the state about 2 years ago. The plan is to retrofit that processing facility to meet our needs, so our mineralization that we are developing, and grow our production significantly over the next 3 or 4 years. And that site that we acquired has an autoclave. The only 2 companies in the United States with an autoclave facility are ourselves and Nevada Gold Mines. So it provides us, in my opinion, with a pretty major competitive advantage when it comes to developing gold mines in Nevada, just because of the type of ore that is secured. So to achieve that, we have 3 projects, and we are at various stages of development in those projects. And our exploration success has been, I think, some of the best in the entire industry over the last 12 to 18 months. And that starts with the discovery of the Hilltop Zone at our flagship Ruby Hill project. So Ruby Hill is our flagship project because it's not only a gold project, but it also has multiple base metal or polymetallic base metal deposits, often rich in silver and locally gold. And we discovered a new zone just over 1.5 years ago that we call the Hilltop structure, where we've now defined multiple deposits that are wide open for expansion. And those are returning some of the highest grade polymetallic mineralization I think you'll see anywhere in the world right now. So that drill bit success has really resulted in a transformation of that project for us. As I said, we're trying to develop 3 projects at once. So to do that is pretty capital intensive. And we didn't announce the terms or who it is, but that we have signed a term sheet with a third party who is going to becoming our joint venture partner on that property. They will acquire, when the deal gets completed, they will be acquiring a minority interest in the project. So we will continue to be majority owner and operator. And that should take a significant amount of the financial pressure off our company as we develop these three assets. We just released additional holes from there that are just outstanding and starting to actually see a lot of copper. in that deposit. So that's something we're going to be following up in later in 2024. But with 3 projects, we're also very active at our Cove property, our Cove deposit at our McCoy Cove property. And the Cove deposit is currently one of the highest grade development stage gold deposits in all of North America. Has a grade of nearly 11 grams per ton on the previous resource. We put in the underground infrastructure to facilitate an underground definition drill program. And that program is yielding some of the best, both in terms of grade and width, intercepts in all of the market right now. And that is expected to be our anchor gold project when we start up our autoclave facility. And then finally at Granite Creek, we discovered a new zone to the north of the historic mine workings called the South Pacific Zone. And we are now, or have drilled that from surface. We are now drilling it from underground as well, because we have rehabilitated the historic mine there, and we are mining gold from that project. But the South Pacific Zone appears to be much larger than the known deposits that were there when we acquired the property 2.5 years ago. And it is open on strike, open at depth, and it's consistently yielding grades of between 10 and 30 grams per ton, which is extremely high for a gold deposit.
Those are very good grades. Just follow-up question there with the joint venture you mentioned that's in progress. Does the company have further interest to entertain joint venture transaction on the other company projects, or do you see that this is really suitable given where you guys are headed? What's your comments on that?
We decided to consider a joint venture partner on Ruby Hill because we are planning to develop the Ruby Deeps deposit, which is a gold-only deposit. And right beside it, we had the Blackjack, which is a zinc-rich deposit that was previously known. In mid 2022, we discovered the hilltop zones I talked about earlier, immediately to the south of those deposits, which are very much polymetallic. And because of these base metal discoveries, we had significant inbound interest about looking at what we're doing and would you consider a partner. So as I said, developing 3 projects at once, we felt it was prudent to consider a partner to help fund that project. And the base metals was success that we were having facilitated our ability to consider multiple different opportunities of partnership. And we chose one mainly because we remain the operator of the project, and it's a well-known partner who's got a great track record of supporting the companies they work with. I'd say never. The other projects, when you have 10 to 13 gram gold deposits, you like to hang on to those 100%. But if there was the right transaction, we'd have to at least consider a partnership on other assets. But currently, we're really looking at just Ruby Hill being our partnerships there because there's base metals in addition to gold. And for the time being, we're considering going it alone on the main 2 gold projects.
And how about the production and cost profile you see for I-80? This is coming back to what you mentioned earlier about future production profile and some of those goals. I know this is speculation here, so share what you can say, of course, Ewan. But over the next few years, as that target of roughly 400 to 500,000 gold ounce equivalent production profile that you guys would expect over that 5-year period, potentially here as a target for the goal. Talk about how that ramps up, as well as how the processing facilities expand to meet those goals. And then also the last thing, what you see pro forma here, again, speculation, so share what you can say. How do you see the company-wide all-in sustaining costs for that production? Maybe just base that on past experience and maybe comparable projects in Nevada.
Yeah, comparable projects in Nevada and Ontario are hard to find or in Canada, because a lot of the operations you see in Nevada and throughout Canada are open pit operations, quite low grade, very fuel intensive, and the costs in those operations with the inflationary environment we've seen has been escalating. And one thing that we're blessed with is very high grade mineralization. And if you look at similar mines like Alamos Island Gold operation in northwestern Ontario, you see the costs on those operations typically around that $1,000 up to $1,200 and sometimes less than $1,000 an ounce, all in sustaining costs. We expect that we will be in that realm of costs. We have put out a preliminary economic assessment for both Cove and Granite Creek previously, and those studies both showed costs in that $1,000 to $1,200 an ounce. So very high margin. I would say that in my view, the underground operations haven't been affected by the escalation in fuel prices that we've seen and some of the other inputs, because you're not moving as much rock at high grade mineralization. You're, instead of running half a gram, you're running 10 grams. So you're moving in terms of ore 5% of what you would in an open pit operation. And then open pit operations, you have to strip off the non-bearing ore. So that's an additional big expense. I'd say that the high quality, well-run underground operations are more amenable to operate in lower gold price environments because you don't have typically as high costs as you would at large open pit projects.
That kind of gives us a perspective here of it's better to compare and see what could be done here. And even obviously as your results ramp up and production profile ramps up over the years, that all makes sense. Maybe just give us one other piece here as far as schedule. What projects, the sequencing, and then also how you guys see handling the in-house essentially processing here and some of the expansion that'll need to be done on the processing front. Can you just cover that off and maybe give us some ideas on how you're seeing this over the next couple of years?
So currently, some of our production that we saw in 22 when we started in 23 was from residual leach programs. So the heap leach projects that operated there previously, there's still gold coming out of those. We're applying cyanide to these heap leaches, and we are profitably at each site taking gold. Now that's not large scale production, that's just residual gold production from those two sites as we move towards starting to rinse those pads and move towards reclamation of the old heap leach portions and transition to the higher grade underground deposits. We completed what we call test mining on 3 different zones at Granite Creek last year. And we mined, so this isn't processed because Nevada Gold Mines, we have an interim processing agreement with them whereby they'll process our material and we're actually selling the oxide mineralization, so the non-refractory. So we did generate revenue from that test mining program that we're carrying out on the historic zones. So that's the Otto, Adam Peak, and OG zones that occur at Granite Creek. And we actually mined about 30,000 ounces. Some of it is still in stockpile. We started processing that material in December, and we expect to see a lot more of that material get processed in April. But we haven't claimed commercial production at that site. We want to drill out or do additional drilling on the South Pacific Zone discovery and do test mining in it to ensure that we know what is the right mining method for it, what is the cost for that mining method going to be, and make sure it's going to be a profitable operation. With the addition of the South Pacific Zone, though, we would expect that that project will become cash flow positive within probably 3 or 4 months of accessing that zone. And that could be accessed as early as mid-year this year. As we continue to build out that project. There is additional drilling, as I said, needed. And then with the addition of South Pacific, we would expect that to see our production go up significantly from that 30,000 ounces, probably in 2025 to over 100,000. In 25, we would likely be looking to bring on some mining and test mining at Ruby Hill, and that's in the Ruby Deeps deposit. And we would continue to see our production escalate year on year until we get our autoclave running, and that's when we would expect to be running at a run rate, including the base metal gold equivalent, at 400,000 to 500,000 ounces per year. So effectively, kind of doubling up every year our production as we get more and more development into our deposits.
That's enough information there that folks can put together a bit of a schedule and sort out, how this is going here. And obviously, the better value opportunity, as you've stated before, is during these times as you guys start to ramp this up. These small scale production, the cash flow from this is so also important in my view. We've seen some other companies take this approach. One that's not really comparable that well, of course, Ewan, completely different jurisdiction, but K92 was able to do something very similar in terms of completely different mining methods. I get it, but take small scale production, ramp that up. And that's so helpful from a capital structure standpoint, from a cash flow standpoint, all those things. So I really like how you guys have structured this and how you're intending to layer on these different projects really in the next couple of years. I want to move to the community front here just for a moment. Just talk about some of those important initiatives that I-80 is doing, of course, to utilize local service providers, create jobs. Obviously, this will ramp up, educate, and really develop skills in the local community in Nevada on also the importance of mining and energy development. I think Nevada probably doesn't need much of an education there, but certainly the rest of the world seems to need that, especially in non-mining jurisdictions that consume mined products. But just talk about your guys' overall community efforts, some of the initiatives you're doing, and anything else you'd like to mention on this front.
Yeah, I would say that we, not just in Nevada, everywhere we've worked, whether it's I-80 or Premier or Wolfden, we've always made engagement with local communities and the people who live in the immediate area as a high priority. We recognize that there are a lot of places that don't really accept mining, unfortunately. And those same places who, some states have moratoriums where you can't even explore for minerals in certain states in the United States. But everybody who's initiated and implemented those measures of no mining here, like a not in my backyard type mentality, they all drive cars, they all have houses, they, you know, take for granted that when you hit the light switch that the lights come on, but they don't ever, most people don't really think about or comprehend how much copper goes into those lights coming on. Like every power line you see is full of copper, and every house is wired with copper, every car is wired with copper. So copper and zinc and nickel, if especially as we move into these battery metals, if they're going to become more and more prevalent, mining is essential to our way of life. And some states really just don't want you there, but the ones that do, you need to make sure that you remind people why it's important, but also make sure you treat them well. They recognize the importance of it to the local communities. If you go to Battle Mountain or Elko or Carlin, Nevada, Eureka, Nevada, those towns exist because of mining. So everybody essentially is either in the mining industry or has a business that benefits from the mining industry. So it doesn't take as much of an education of the people in these places about why mining is important and why we're good for the communities. And you get tremendous support. That's why Nevada is ranked #1 as a jurisdiction in the world. I'm involved with another company who's been trying to get a permit to advance a project in Maine, USA. And recently the rezoning got turned down by essentially kind of people who are more environmentalists rather than business people, despite the communities all being, the nearby communities being all in favor. 7 regulators were implemented that, no, not yet anyway. So it's pretty unfortunate that people don't really recognize how important that mining and minerals are, and that education of the local communities is very important. But even sometimes, like that example I used in Maine, even sometimes when you have community support, some level of government can get in the way, or NGOs can get in the way. So it's an industry that we all use. It's critical to our everybody's way of life, look at a house, how much metals goes into building a house or a building. Metals and mining are critical to our way of life. Cell phones are built off metals that are mined from around the world. Computers, everything you see in your office has some influence of mining. And it's trying to make people understand that even the ones who are opposed to it, that you use the product. So either don't use the product and live like you're speaking, or support it, because if you want to use your cell phone, you're going to have mining somewhere in the world, and it's better to have mining in places who have rules and regulations environmentally than places that don't. And Canada, the United States, and Australia have some of the best regulations when it comes to safe and clean mining anywhere. So that not in my backyard is probably being more destructive to the environment than doing it right here at home.
Ewan, great points. Well said. Couldn't agree with you more, of course. The last comment you made there, absolutely true. One person says not in my backyard, the next person says not in my backyard, the next person says not in my backyard. Where do you go? There is a correlation of countries that have been able to have a responsible mining framework and natural resource development responsibly results in the bottom line wealth and ability for that particular jurisdiction to succeed. And also, just environmentalists today are not environmentalists really. And some of it's education, some of it's because a lot of these NGOs are obviously paid by others. It doesn't do any justice because it's really belittling the whole idea of responsible stewardship. There's US agencies out there that can't even manage their own mandated resources. And so it's a longer conversation for a different podcast for sure. But I appreciate how you see this and how you characterize this and how important it is. And even gold, the industrial use of gold in some of these devices. The fact that oil and gas make a lot of products, not just energy generation, but a lot of other products that we use in our daily lives. So it's always good to get a flavor from our guests on how they see the world, how they see energy, how they see mining.
One thing I'd like to point out is that in terms of what we call the critical metals today, the ones used in batteries and phones and solar panels, etc., 80% of the metals used in all of those products come from China. So 80% of the critical minerals, as they're called, come from China. The majority of copper comes from places like the Congo and China. So the metals that we need are often made in countries not so favorable. And there is, I'd say, some geopolitical tension between China and the United States. There's various things going on behind the scenes that if those escalated, and China decide, well, we're not giving the United States any more of these metals, what would happen? The chips, 50% of the chips used around the world in vehicles and computers and even weaponry are produced in Taiwan. And Taiwan's a kind of a place that's been teetering on what is China going to do there. So if there are continued escalation in this sort of economic almost turmoil between the two places, what would happen if some of these metals were turned off to the US? So I think it is critical to start making more and more of our own minerals in our own backyard, and that not in my backyard mentality has to go away. And the environmentalists who do show up, if they're from out of state, they flew in an airplane to get there, they got in a car and drove to the site to protest you. So they're using the products that we make to protest us. And to me, it's somewhat hypocritical, but that's just me.
Oh, I fully agree. Meanwhile, they grab their TikTok app and here you go, right? So the joke is really on the people who don't suspect the joke is on them. A perfect example of what you said that carries into the energy sector. Every fifth bulb in the United States is powered by a commercial reactor, and every 10th bulb is Russian supplied fuel for those reactors. That's exactly the setup you have with every type of metal, and generally all of them, because there's been this ignorance of domestic energy independence and domestic natural resource supply chain, hence base metal mining, hence precious metal mining. So I appreciate your comments there. Ewan, with the company surrounding itself with Nevada currently, but as M&A opportunities come about, and I'm sure you've had quite an interesting look at various companies around the world and looking at some of the valuations of some of these juniors, as you and I have looked at and seen, back to our comments about these things trading for next to nothing. Is the company open to Great Basin region United States, maybe some surrounding states, or even other jurisdictions outside of the United States as it goes forward with its growth plan?
I would say we're quite open. If you look at where we came from, spun out of Premier Gold Mines. Premier, we had the Mercedes mine in Mexico. We had our projects in the Red Lake camp. We had the Greenstone operation in northwestern Ontario, and we had Nevada. So we were quite diversified. What we've created here is a very focused company on one small region of the world that just happens to be the world's most productive gold district. And so we are really, if there is a project that could be added, the best place where we would get good good returns in our view would just be projects that enhance or benefit our current operations. So that would mean Nevada. But that said, there's good mineral potential throughout the sort of Great Basin. And we do keep an eye on what people do in neighboring states like Arizona, Utah, Idaho, even California to a point. So I'd say never, but we currently have 5 projects all in one small geographic area within Nevada. And to move away from that, the opportunity would have to be very special.
And it is worth mentioning that we've seen outside mid-tier ambitioned companies like Caliber Mining enter into Nevada, part of a de-risking move for them, as well as Orla Mining enter in Nevada as well. And to some degree, with pipeline there and Panama not working out, maybe the perfect timing there. Obviously, moving into Nevada makes some sense. And I think that really speaks, Ewan, to the stability and predictability of the regulatory regime that Nevada has provided, at least in the past, and it looks like in the foreseeable future this will continue. And with that, maybe you can just give us a flavor on another piece of the strategy longer term for the company as it becomes a mid-tier producer and maybe even senior, depending on what happens and how you guys expand these. Do you see that conditions are such, and this is a little bit of your team view as well, but do you guys intend on continuing that forward with resisting the buyout offer? Or do you guys see that really at some point a buyout makes sense, obviously, if the price is right?
Um, as a publicly traded company with shareholders, you have to always keep an open mind. One thing you pointed out is the geopolitical risk. You point out Panama, what just happened in Panama. It's not only Panama. Kinross had a mine taken away from them in Russia when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started. Centerra Gold had their mine in Kyrgyzstan taken away by the Kyrgyz. Panama was just shut down. There's political environment changes throughout the world that make places less stable. And I think there's always going to be some political instability. The Middle East, what's going on there? Barrick, one of their big growth projects is in Pakistan. Is this really the right time to go build a new mine in Pakistan? I'd say probably not. So geopolitical risk is one of the biggest risks in mining. Not only, as I said, where do the metals come from, but also getting and keeping your operation. And Nevada being ranked number 1, I'm sure that a lot of companies who don't have or have operations in maybe not so favorable jurisdictions are always keeping an eye out on what's going on in Nevada because it is such a good jurisdiction. And if you could reduce your geopolitical risk profile, then I think it's a benefit. But us as a public company who's found ourselves in a difficult financing environment, we have to keep all our eyes and ears open for all types of opportunities. And my previous 2 companies I ran, Premier and Wolfden, were both acquired So it is something that if we feel it's the right time and the right deal, it's always something you have to. You can't ignore it. And in the mining industry, bigger companies are always looking at smaller companies, and smaller companies are looking at even smaller companies, and small companies are looking at the big guys to see if they have an asset that maybe they could acquire. So people are always looking at each other in this industry, and if there's a good transaction to be done that comes out of that, then our job as the management of the company is to do what's best for the shareholders in the environment you're in.
Well, Ewan, thanks for your time. Why don't we leave it there for now? And last question here as we wrap up for potential investors who are listening in. The company has a market capitalization of about 480 million US dollars. Why should I-80 Gold be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors portfolio at this point?
I think the primary four reasons to look at our company are: one, we are diversified. So we're not just a gold company. In fact, the Blackjack, Fad, and Hilltop deposits at Ruby Hill, when we bring them to resource, we expect to rank as some of the highest grade polymetallic deposits anywhere in the world. So we are diversified in terms of metals. Another reason is we are, as I said, 100% US pure play in Nevada, the world's safest jurisdiction. We have over 6.4 million ounces of measured and indicated gold resources, and over 8 million ounces in inferred. So combined, 14.5 million ounces plants us in the top three in Nevada in terms of resources. On top of that, we have 104 million ounces measured indicated silver resource and 76 million ounces of silver resource and inferred. So that makes us one of the largest holders of gold and silver resources in all of the United States. With our growth, we expect to build a company with a target of becoming the second or third largest gold or gold equivalent producing company in the United States. And we have permitted brownfield mine sites with two existing processing plants. And as we discussed earlier in this session, getting a permit to build these sites is one of the biggest hurdles. So we've overcome that with the deals we've done and the infrastructure that we've successfully acquired already.
And Ewan, what is the best way for folks to reach out to the company?
Best way is to do a bit of a review on what we're doing on the website, i80gold.com. We do have a significant amount of information there: technical reports, resource models, presentations, both detailed project and corporate presentations, so you can get a flavor of what we're doing and who we are. And then the Reno and Thunder Bay offices are really quite accessible for people to call if they have any further questions. I try to field as many of those questions as I can.
Very well, and I do think the audience should have I-80 Gold on a short list of mid-tier growth companies to keep an eye out as they get into these sector equities, and I think it presents a very good proposition here as we've highlighted on the discussion here today. Well, Ewan, really good to get you finally on the program. Thank you for the introduction to I-80, and looking forward to having you back this year for an update on progress. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed it.